Good morning. I want to read to you today chapters 33 through 36 of my little treatise that I call Thus Spake Christopher, since it's loosely written in the style of Thus Spake Zarathustra, and it details my philosophy of non-dualism and theory and practice and how I tend to live my life and how I view reality. So let me get started by sharing my screen. And as usual, I just have a couple of housekeeping things I need to take care of real quickly. I need to hide some things from my view, so that I can see them. Okay. Also, recall that if you go to my webpage, www.docbenton.com, go down to the section that says the best of Doc Benton, then you can find a link here to Thus Spake Christopher. You can open that up, read the whole thing online, or download it to read later if you wish. There are a lot of references to Jewish texts, rabbinic literature. If you really want to follow all of those references, and some of you might, if you don't have those texts, you can go to this free online website called Safaria and find all the texts there. This website's pretty easy to navigate. Okay, so let's get started with chapter 33. Chapter 33. The man next asked, "What should one do when the whole world seems to be besieged by troubles?" I began to answer. There is an ancient story in the book of instruction about a time of trouble for the Hebrews when they were enslaved in another country. In response, they cried out to the mystery of mysteries, and a voice eventually told them to retreat to inside their homes, while death roamed about outside and took the lives of the firstborn. The Book of Radiance comments on this story and says, whenever the destroyer is out and about in the world, one should take shelter so as not to be consumed by that destructive force. However, there is a deeper meaning to all of this. When troubles abound in the outside world, it is often difficult to find anything uplifting outside of ourselves to hold on to. In these circumstances, we must go within and cling to the source of life inside of us. Adhere to the still and audible voice within, and to the love, oneness, and joy that resides at the center of your being. By doing so, you will also be planting seeds that will eventually sprout in the outer world too. Thus spake Christopher. Chapter 34. The man asked, "Why does anything exist at all?" I began to answer. Your question is basically, how come this world exists instead of nothing? Your confusion arises because all examples of nothingness that you are thinking of are only forms of relative nothingness, such as an empty box. In this case, there's only nothingness with respect to the inside of the box, but not an absence of everything. The box itself is there. Things are different, though, when it comes to an absolute nothingness. An absolute nothingness would also have to contain everything. Why? Because if it didn't, that could be defined by this characteristic of not containing everything, and that would be something. In other words, any nothingness that has a defining characteristic is not an absolute nothingness by virtue of the fact that it possesses a characteristic that sits outside of that nothingness. Just as the box stands outside of the nothingness of the empty box, this characteristic stands outside of the absolute nothingness we're trying to experience, and that keeps this nothingness from being absolute. The characteristic itself is there. Thus, absolute nothingness has to contain everything, but within that nothingness, no distinctions are made. In a similar way, if all possibilities exist, then that totality would also have to include absolute nothingness, since without it, it would by definition be incomplete. Hence, absolute nothingness and the totality of all possibilities are one and the same. You can't have one without the other. But isn't that paradoxical and contradictory? Of course it is. Nonetheless, that is why we exist. You can't have complete nothingness without also having complete existence. It is a paradox, but it is a paradox that makes all existence possible without there having to be an external creator. It is simply the nature of absolute nothingness to be absolutely everything, and the nature of absolute everything to be absolute nothingness. At the same time, because it is paradoxical, it is also unknowable to us. We can come to the edge of this paradox and sense it and smell it, but there is a point beyond which nothing more can be said about it. This paradox can inspire us and nurture us, and we can even analyze large isolated parts of it, but we can never comprehend it fully. It is the greatest mystery, totally unknowable, and yet it is also that to which we should always cling. And it is because of this paradoxical mystery that the world both exists and fails to exist at the same time. Finally, if you find fault with any of my arguments above, then remember this. They are only words that are designed to lead you to a particular experience, followed by a proper understanding of that experience. That is all. Thus spake Christopher. The man asked, "If reality is like a dream, why can't I do all the things I do when I'm dreaming?" I began to answer, "This world is like a dream, but it is as if before being born, we signed a license agreement that says that change will be permitted, but only in ways that are limited by following certain rules, rules that we might call the laws of physics. Thus, for example, we can fly like we do in a dream, but only if we build an airplane. We can marry the girl of our dreams, but only if we court her properly. Hence, we can pretty much do everything we might do in a dream, but only at a slower pace and with more effort, since change is now constrained by laws of nature. And why would we do this? Why would we, so to speak, sign such a license agreement? Why would anyone want a world in which things change only in response to great effort? Undoubtedly, so that we can have stability, and so that we can learn those things that only come through making such great efforts, including even how to make a proper effort. Furthermore, if you want change, then you have probably heard it said that if you want to receive, then you must first ask. The Book of Radiance expresses this by saying that the impulse must always first come from us, and then the mystery will respond. I've talked about this process too in the work of creation. Also, the Book of Radiance calls this world the world of separation, and it is a world that can often be quite bitter. However, how can you understand sweetness if you haven't experienced bitterness? Similarly, how can you understand freedom without knowing limitation? And how can you even begin to comprehend the infinite and that which is eternal without also knowing what is finite and always changing? The truth is that this world is the way it is because it is we who want it to be that way so that we can learn. And it's only through experiencing constant change that we can realize that there is something at the center of it all, which is forever changeless. Thus spake Christopher. Chapter 36. The man then asks, "What is the multiverse?" I began to answer, "The multiverse is everything, all possibilities, all that is, past, present, future, all at once. Furthermore, we are always moving through the multiverse from one reality to the next. What we perceive as time is, in my opinion, simply our incremental movement from one part of the multiverse to another. Thus, what we think of as the immediate future is usually just a variation of our previous perception in which everything has made a slight change one way or another. Occasionally, though, we find ourselves at what we think of as turning points, where that slight change is suddenly perceived as a big change, such as a movement from peace to war. Nonetheless, if we think of every possibility as existing all at once, then every change in perception is simply a shift in focus by awareness from one part of the multiverse to another. Because of the constraints we agree to abide by in order to make our perception of physical reality relatively stable, change is allowed in only certain ways, and this results in what we think of as the arrow of time, the constant flow from past to present to future. However, the non-physical levels are not so constrained. Thus, in your mind, you can easily travel from the present to the past you have experienced and to any of the various futures you might experience. You can also travel to alternate paths to explore the ramifications of different choices you might have made. And you can travel to alternate presents to see different skulls you might have developed. And those skulls can then be incorporated into your next choice for the future. Additionally, you can visit friends you are connected to regardless of whether they are currently in physical reality or not. Again, because of the constraints we voluntarily adopt to keep our perception of physical reality stable, we cannot change those things we have done in the past, but we can make the changes that we would like to make to our past part of our next future. Thus, if you were cruel to someone in the past, that can't be changed, but we can make kindness to that person part of our future. Doing these sorts of things is what we call repairing the world, and is how we make the world a better place. Thus spake Christopher. Okay, and that is going to conclude it for today. We covered 4 sections, so next time I'll start up with chapter 37, but for now, let me stop sharing. And I'm back. So, I hope you're enjoying this text and getting some good things out of it. Non-duality is not for everyone, but at the same time, yes, it is for everyone, in my opinion. So, I hope you're enjoying things. I hope you join me again. And for now, I'll just say so long and be well.